We are live.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Kitchener City Council meeting. Due to COVID-19 and recommendations by Waterloo Region Public Health to exercise physical distancing, City Hall is only open for select services by appointment only. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting live stream video at kitchener.ca/watchnow. While in-person delegation requests are not feasible at this time, members of the public are invited to have submitted written comments or to participate electronically in the meeting by contacting Jeff Bunn, Deputy City Clerk, at jeff.bunn@kitchener.ca. That's jeff.bunn@kitchener.ca. Any written comments that have been received will be circulated prior to the meeting and will form part of the public record. As we begin this evening's meeting, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement that this evening we gather on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. And now I would invite everyone to participate in the singing of O Canada and to stand as they're able. I would invite members of council to turn off their screen if they're going to be standing. Whoops. Bear with me 1 second, please. Sorry, 1 second. My cheat sheet has disappeared. There we go. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been moved by Councillor Chapman that the minutes of the regular meeting held September 14th and the special meeting held September 14th, 2020, as mailed to the mayor and councillors be accepted. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, there being none. Are there there's no communication to refer to file, no presentations. We do have one delegation this evening. I would like to remind delegations that under Council's Rules of Procedure, previously registered delegations will now be heard and announced, and they're each allowed to have 5 minutes to speak. And our delegation is with respect to item 9A, the Affordable Housing and Inclusionary Notice of No Motion from Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Ioannidis, do you want to just perhaps read the operative phrases of your motion ahead of the delegation?
Sure. So you just wanted me to say, therefore, be it resolved, those ones?
Yes, please.
Therefore, be it resolved that the City Council requests the province to reinstate the Planning Act provisions enabling a municipality to apply inclusionary zoning provisions within its entire jurisdiction, or at a minimum to enable inclusionary zoning along major transit bus routes throughout the city. Be it finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs, to the local MPs and MPPs, to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, to the Association of Municipalities Ontario, and to the Regional Waterloo and local area municipalities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. And now I'll invite Ms. Poole to make her presentation.
I believe there are 2 slides, and that's slide 2.
Oh, yes, sorry, it's Mr. Poole. Apologies.
It's okay. You'll remember me sometime. A lot of people make that mistake. So I think that's slide 2 rather than slide 1.
Okay, you're looking for slide 1?
Yes.
Mr. Bunn,
there are only 2 slides. Yes, okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to address the resolution proposed by Councillor Ioannidis, in particular, the phrase, whereas the City of Kitchener has adopted council policies to encourage development of new affordable rental housing units, which provide exemptions and deferrals of development fees charges. We need to be very careful in allowing exemption from fees. Development fees help finance the additional costs of roads, water, and waste needs in parkland. Canceling development fees increases the burden on the budget and thus on taxpayers, so it is a real cost. The recent period of development fee exemption cost tens of millions to regional governments. The NBLC consultant does not address fees, and the external review by Urban Metrics did not evaluate fees and charges, assuming them to be accurately and already vetted by municipalities. If fees are not adequately evaluated, the affordable housing goals of the city are in jeopardy. Are there alternatives? Let me give you 2. If we must give developers incentives to build, let them be tied to the council policy to reduce greenhouse gases. A developer would be required to put in ground source heat pumps, solar panels, green roofs, and other energy reducing features. A new build would have to be LEED Platinum, the highest achievement in all areas of environmental design. Or, if we keep development fees, let's redirect them to create affordable housing for those in income levels below those covered by the current IZ proposal. On the scope of the IZ study, I'm concerned that the consultant's report is focused on market economics.
That motion.
Sorry?
Sorry, Mr. Bunn, your microphone's on.
Sorry, thank you. My apologies.
No worries. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I'm concerned that the IZ consultant's report is focused on market economics to exclusion of other things. In the words of the consultant, the cost of inclusionary zoning cannot be passed on through higher prices and rents because developers are already pricing units as high as the market will bear. Without the prospect for sufficient profit, developers will not be motivated to build, unquote. In short, it is assumed that developer profits cannot be reduced. However, in one review of IZ, several factors need to be considered, not just the economic one. adequate analysis should also get feedback from social housing experts, advocacy groups, and residents. If you look at the slide, when you start with a principle on the left-hand side, that developers will not build if their profits are not high enough, and you consult principally with them, the social aspects of IZ are discounted. In sum, I would ask that a similar assessment of IZ be done from a social needs perspective. IZ can be a solution, but it has to be inclusive of the working poor. If the city starts by partnering with the developments and ends with a minimum land market disruption, it will miss the basic aim of addressing housing for those in need. My suggestion is to partner with all stakeholders. Get expert advice from social planning experts. Get expert advice from the CMHC Collaborative Housing Research Network. Finally, the current IZ proposal does not work for even the lowest income cohort, as the consultant's chart shows. The next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, yes.
Previous slide.
If you substitute what I said, what was in the consultant's report with these two things, partner with the stakeholders, and secondly, on the right-hand side, balance social and economic need. Next slide, please. Minimum, I guess it would be the other slide, yes. Thank you. Minimum wage is $25,700 in Ontario, assuming a full-time job and employment for the entire year. A minimum wage earner would have to spend about 70% of their income to meet the average market rent of $1,100. Does IZ address the need of even the lowest income decile, as in this chart? Proceeding with IZ as it stands would really create exclusionary zoning, since it would not cover those on minimum wage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Poole. Any questions for the delegation? There don't appear to be any questions, sir. Thank you for, oh, sorry, Councillor Chapman. Apologies.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Poole, for coming in and speaking to us with and giving us your thoughts. How would you, well, okay, so where would you like to see Kitchener Council go with all of this? I mean, you talk about the sort of economic driven nature of the report and that there's, you know, that's maybe not the best way to approach this. Can you sort of sum up your thoughts?
Yes. I think that the report as it stands is a good one because it really details out all of the economic parameters of inclusionary zoning. The problem is there needs to be a better balance between the affordable housing goals and developer interests. The expert analysis focuses only on the developer interest. I think that the balance needs to be more in the area of what is the public benefit and what's the benefit for those in need. And I might point out that access to adequate housing is a human right for everyone in Canada, as passed under the National Housing Strategy Act. The right to adequate housing is a fundamental human right affirmed in international law. We need to ensure that that right is attainable. And I believe that having other expert analyses of the social aspects of housing needs would be a much needed addition and balance to what you have before you.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Mr. Poole. Okay, Councillor Ioannidis, since we are on this item and we've had a delegation, we'll continue with this with your motion. Is there a seconder for Councillor Ioannidis's motion? Seconded by Councillor Singh. Councillor Ioannidis, did you want to speak to it or first, or?
I'll just let everyone else speak and then I'll come at the end.
Okay. Does anybody else want to make comments? Councillor Marsh.
I can jump in just to say, even though this tool might not be perfect, Mr. Poole makes some valid points, this is only one tool in our toolbox, and it's something that I have personally anticipated for a long time. And I'm really hopeful that our motion that I am most certain will be approved, it will pass, I should say. I hope that it will take effect, because having inclusionary zoning only along the major transit station area corridor is not the way to go, in my opinion. We really need to increase the housing stock of affordable housing in our community, as I think all of council is on board with, and it's time that the province hear from municipalities in how best to do that, not just give us a directive down from the province, when really not many cities in Ontario even have a major transit station area in the first place. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention I guess Dr. Poole raised some good points. I continue to struggle with the supply and demand issue, though. I think, yes, developers in many cases have, fantastic profits, but I think we also have to be very careful to understand that there's a housing shortage in general, not just an affordable housing shortage. I think we've all heard the stories and reports of people frustrated trying to buy, $500,000 and $600,000 homes. When they go up in the market, there's multiple offers and people are beat out. And I'm really concerned about, making sure that we keep that adequate supply there. So I think we have to be careful in how we approach that. I'm happy to support Councillor Ioannidis's amendment. I think it's a step in the right direction. Really, the fulsome solution to this, in my opinion, to prevent municipalities from competing with each other when it comes to development, is I'd like to see a provincial or even a federal rule come down that inclusionary zoning is mandated throughout every zone, and then that way you don't have the issues of Kitchener pushing too far ahead with affordable housing only to see development lost to Waterloo or Cambridge. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and I'm happy to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Davey. Councillor Michaud. No, Councillor Michaud, you're muted. You're still muted. Try now. Try again. Nope.
Now?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with what fellow councillors have just said, and I certainly will support Councillor Ioannidis's motion. I just want to say that I do agree with Councillor Davey. We need a broader mandate for this right across all the provinces, all the other cities, so that it is a more fulsome initiative when it comes to affordable housing. But this is only just a piece of the puzzle. This is a very small piece, and while it might seem big to some people out there, it's not going to solve the problem of homelessness. It's not going to put a roof over everyone's head, but it is a start in the right direction. So I'm happy that we're doing this, and I will support it. And I appreciate Councillor Ioannidis putting this forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Singh, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and also in full support of the motion. And it's fantastic that Councillor Ioannidis touched on what the missing aspects of, an additional tool that municipalities now have in ensuring that there are more affordable units or can be provided, in our communities. I think, restricting along the transit nodes or the higher transit doesn't go far enough. Especially because it's not equitable. We have fantastic communities throughout our city. We have amazing neighborhoods throughout our city, and dictating that someone who may not be able to, who may be in that, housing continuum where they have struggles, and them being corralled into a defined area is upsetting in my mind. And I think there does need to be a serious relook at this, and I'm hopeful that the province will see this advocacy and look to broaden that, and allow that equitability of that affordable housing continuum throughout our community. So I think this is the missing piece, what the province gave as a tool to the municipalities, but this advocacy, I think, encourages enhancement of that tool. And I'm hopeful that the province will view it as such and make amendments accordingly. I think, as others have said, this is not the all end all solution to affordable housing. This is one aspect of a tool the municipalities can use. We can't use it too heavily because, again, that creates other issues at hand as well. As Councillor Davey had said, when it comes to developer incentives or developer profit margins, at the end of the day, we have to incentivize. We have to ensure that there is enough of a housing stock that's coming online that ensures that housing is not an issue throughout all the continuums. So I think we have to tread lightly, but at the same time, we need to be cognizant that there are aspects of our community that are struggling, and we need to ensure that affordable housing stays at the forefront of our policy making, especially when we consider planning aspects. I think there are other tools as well. I had some initial conversation over the weekend with former Mayor Carl Zaire. He touched on additional tools that could be advocated, aspects of asking the province to similar to parkland dedication. Perhaps any new development, there could be an aspect where each developer or development would pay a certain fee that could go into a pot that could allow for affordable housing options or partnerships with developers that could help seed additional development happening that could bring that or bring forward affordable housing units at a far faster pace than really waiting for the development community to solve. We can't ask for the development community to solve this. This has to be a partnership. This has to be something that we have to take a strong leadership on, and at the same time seek out a balanced approach with the development community to solve a continuing problem that's not going to solve itself anytime soon, and likely will get worse if you don't take the right steps. But I think this is one important step forward in an aspect of advocacy, and I want to compliment Councillor Ioannidis having picked up on this.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I presume we're going to talk more about the report after this, right? Right now we're just
when we get to reports, we will. We're dealing with this item since we had a delegation.
Okay, so I agree with the motion. I think the affordable housing or the inclusionary zoning should not be restricted to certain areas of the city. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the initial iteration of this inclusionary zoning bylaw was citywide, and the current government reduced the boundaries to just the major transit station areas. So that was unfortunate, and this is sort of an attempt to broaden that and open it up so that that we don't have just certain areas that we can enforce this bylaw. So I fully support the expansion of these boundaries. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Chapman. That appears to be all of the speakers. I'll just briefly add my own comments. I will be supporting Councillor Ioannidis's motion, and I'm glad it's here because I too am a strong proponent in believing that as we look at the full continuum of housing, it should be available throughout the city. I do think, and I had a similar conversation with former Mayor Zaire the other day as well, as we were talking about a different issue, and the notion of being able to explore how inclusionary zoning may be able to, in fact, be modeled in a way similar to the parkland dedication may be helpful as one of the methods in terms of how to make to implement what we're talking about here. So I too would like to thank Councillor Ioannidis for bringing this forward as part of the broader piece of work that we'll be dealing with shortly. And And then we can, and hopefully we'll see a positive response from the province, because I think this is something that's of interest in other municipalities as well. So all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, we'll now, sorry, just bear with me 1 second. We'll now move on to the reports of the committees, and we have the audit committee. Councillor Davey, can I ask you to bring that one forward, please?
Yeah, please. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gazzola that there's just one item from the audit committee be adopted.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? There doesn't appear to be any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Communities and Infrastructure Services Committee, Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Yes, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider that items number 1 through 5 on the Community Infrastructure Services Committee be approved.
Thank you. We do have some questions on this or comments. Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I'd like to have items 2, 3, and 4 both dealt with separately.
Okay.
And while I'm at it, I would like recorded votes on all 3 of them.
On all 3 of them? Okay. So I will come back to Councillor to those items. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'd like to also speak to item 1.
Okay, so we'll deal with that one separately. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, I'm assuming this was Councillor Gazzola's intention, but for item number 3, I don't need to speak to it, but I'd just like to vote on Rossford Crescent separately, if I could.
Okay. So with that, I'll deal with item number 5 first. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll go to item number 1, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to say that I know staff has put a lot of thought into this, and they've agreed to put a stop sign at Gage coming from Belmont. I still have worries, and I think residents in the area continue to be concerned about traffic going from Strange down Waverly and turning right onto Gage. I guess what I would ask of staff is that, well, maybe, is Barry here, Mr. Cronkite?
I'm not sure, but Mr. Reedman would be.
I guess one thing that has been brought up is the signage. And I know Mr. Cronkite has said that there would be clear signage in the area. Could I just get a brief description of what that's going to look like?
Mr. Reedman, can you assist?
Through the mayor, I can. So there would be signage indicating that there is a new stop sign ahead for traffic traveling along Gage Avenue. And then staff have also committed to putting instructional signage for children to assist with crossing Waverly at the low volume side. And there is a landing pad, a sidewalk pad proposed at the corner of Gage and Waverly. As part of this, and then working with the school as well to get information out to the school children and families that use that crossing.
Okay, so, and I understand there's also a commitment by staff to be monitoring the intersection. Is there a timeline as to when you anticipate the installation of these features?
Through the chair, so staff will work, or through the mayor, staff will work as quickly as possible after this. I'm not sure if locates are required, but there's usually a bit of a turnaround for that. And then the work would be proceeding as soon as possible after that. And then in terms of monitoring, staff would be looking at the early school year patterns and then considering next steps if necessary.
Okay, and I'm sure the residents themselves will continue to monitor it as they have up to this point. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I just want to add my note of concern. I am usually very much in favor of trusting staff's expertise when it comes to transportation services, but in this case, I really feel like this is a unique intersection that I'm just hopeful that the treatment that staff is recommending will serve the correct purpose and that all the kids will be safe. And I hope that also if we see that there is a need for more, that it will come back to us in a short amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. So item number 1 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, Councillor Johnston, you're opposed? Or was that a delayed in favor? In favor. Okay, thank
Sorry.
you.
And I was
That's
opposed.
clear. Oh, you were opposed? Okay.
I was, yeah, it's just an automatic reflex.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marsh. That is carried. We'll now go on to item number 2, Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I'm not going to be supporting item number 2. I discussed this at committee. If money were no object and things were a little bit different, I imagine I could support something like this. But right now, money is important. We're right in the midst of something that we don't know where we're going on it. I have been reviewing what our estimates look like for this year, and the biggest money loser, the biggest impact is in our recreational services. If I remember correctly, there was a shortfall of $7 or $8 million, which relates to keeping our facilities open and not getting able to get full attendance at these facilities. So we just can't be all things to all people. And this is something that we don't have in our budget. And so you're moving it to go ahead and spend it. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to go hat in hand to the province asking for funding under phase 2, to cover things like this. So if there were a list of priorities and this had to compete with all our priorities, I'm not sure that everyone would support it. So I won't be supporting it, and I did ask for a recorded vote.
Okay, any other comments? I will be supporting this, and hopefully council will as well. I think one of the things we're very quickly realizing, and we just had Mr. Chapman and I had a pandemic control group meeting prior to this council meeting, and increasingly we're seeing around the community concerns around physical and mental wellness and well-being, and work that all of us at the municipality, at the lower tier municipalities, at the region, with community partners are going to have to undertake in this space. And part of that is providing as much recreational opportunities for people as possible as we go into this next wave and into the winter months. One of the things we're recognizing as well, for example, is there will be a lot more seniors around this winter because, as we know, many tend to go down south typically, but with the border being the way it is, at least for the time being, and concerns around COVID south of the border, I would anticipate there's going to be a lot more older adults looking for the opportunity to participate in recreational activities as well. And we're going to, I think our challenges are going to be not having enough space to meet the needs going forward. And in the long run, that's going to be important. So recorded vote has been called on this item. I'll start with Ward 1 on this issue. And so that'd be Councillor Davey.
I'm in favor.
Ward 2, Councillor Schneider.
In favor.
Ward 3, Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Ward 4, Councillor Michaud. So your mic wasn't on.
Favor?
Okay, thank you. Ward 5, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
In favor?
Ward 6, Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Ward 7, Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Ward 8, Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Ward 9, Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Ward 10, Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well, so the motion does carry. We'll move on now to item number 3. Councillor Gazzola, you asked that this item be dealt with separately, and Councillor Davey, you asked that we deal with Rossford Crescent separately. Councillor Gazzola, did you have some comments to make?
Yeah, I have a comment that I'll make. I'm probably whistling in the wind, but I've been making this comment for many years. I think it's more relevant now than in other years when we had a lot more funding available to us. But here we have, and it's basically Rossford Crescent that I'm basically referring to. But we have a street there, 22 out of 24 residents, properties are not in favor of these sidewalks. They've gone, I don't know how much, they've gone since the inception of time without sidewalks. If we had, our druthers and money were no object, perhaps I could see us going ahead with this, even though I find it really difficult when you have 90% of the people who are directly involved are not in favor of it. But setting all that aside, right now we're up against tough times. And I asked staff what this was going to cost to do, and it's not a lot of money. I'm not sure if it was $75,000 or something for the 3 of them, but the money to do that comes out of that infrastructure program, the WIP that we set in place a few years ago to improve our infrastructure. And so really it's taking money out of there that we can ill afford to take it out of there, because we're going to be facing increases in our utility rates this year just to put more money into that WIP account. So if this were another time, maybe I could even support it, but it's more relevant now than ever that we should be. Right now, to me, it's something that would be sort of nice to have as opposed to something that we really need to have at this time. So I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. I have a couple other people in the queue. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. Rossford Crescent is in Ward 8, and we had a discussion about this when it came up on the agenda last week. Listen, I don't think that sidewalks should be politicized. I really don't. This is having a sidewalk on a street where there's a community path that leads to Zosky Park. We're encouraging more people to be walking around neighborhoods, to be active. We want people to use active transportation in a safe way. Councillor Gazzola just said that, if it was a different time, the thing is, replace infrastructure, we are replacing it for the next 30 to 40 years. So if we're not putting sidewalks on streets, a whole community, a whole street, a whole area is losing out on the ability to walk safely around their neighborhood. And it's something that Councillor Chapman had brought up as well last week, was talking about the accessibility issue. It is. It's a huge issue for people to be able to get safely around their neighborhood. Staff worked very hard on this so that they could come up with a way of putting a sidewalk in on one side of the road, being able to preserve parking. And I believe, and if someone from transportation is on here, and I can't see their name, that they were able to save everything except for one tree, I believe. So they worked really hard to come up with a design that would work best for the street. Again, we're redesigning the street for the next 30 to 40 years. It's not just about today. And I think it's really important for us to take a look at it from a big picture perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider.
So I totally agree with what Councillor Johnson has said. I just also want to make the point about looking down the road too, as new owners come in to purchase these homes on Rossford with young children. The availability to get to that trail to Zosky Park is really important. So while we do look after the needs of the day, we need to look forward to the needs of the future too.
Thanks, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Chapman, you didn't want to speak anymore on this?
Well, I mean, Councillor Johnson sort of alluded to what I said at the committee meeting, that you know, if we frame this in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, you know, sidewalks, we shouldn't even be discussing this, in my mind. It's something that should just be a given, and we should be finding ways to ensure that everybody has, you know, a surface to get around on. So those are my views.
Okay, thank you. And certainly I'm supportive of it. So a recorded vote has been called. So I'll deal with Rossford Crescent first. On that one, I'll start with Ward 10. So Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman, Ward 9.
In favor.
Councillor Johnson, Ward 8.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis, Ward 7.
In favor.
Councillor Singh, Ward 6.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock, Ward 5.
In favor.
Councillor Michaud, Ward 4.
Favor.
Councillor Gazzola, Ward 3. Can you turn your mic on, Councillor Gazzola?
Sorry about that. Opposed.
No worries. Okay, thank you. Councillor Schneider, Ward 2.
In favor.
And Councillor Davey, Ward 1.
I'm opposed.
Okay, and the mayor is in favor. The motion carries. Can I do the other two to get, do we need a recorded vote on the other two, or?
No, I don't want to waste your time.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, one opposed, that's carried. We'll now move on to item 4, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I guess there's some staff here to respond. I just had a couple of other questions.
Sure, go ahead.
My first question is, do we have any options here? Silence.
Who wants to take that?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Stuart, the question was, do we have any options here?
Through you, I guess the option is to do part or all of what was suggested, or to do none of it would be basically the 3 options.
Yeah, okay, we're okay. Can I thank you, by the way, for the information you provided me in the last few days. I've been going over it. I'm still struggling with where we've come, because if we looked at this a year ago, right now, we were looking at a project that was going to cost $9 million. A year ago, that's what would have been our figure. And today we're dealing with a figure of 14 million. And does that even include the 1.7 million that we pulled out at the beginning of February? Because if it doesn't, we're looking at a $15.7 million project that a year ago today was going to cost us $9 million. That's a 74% difference. That's pretty hard to live with. I know a lot of you talked about like your home when you ran into problems, but if you run into a problem like this in your homes, you're going to do something. So I'm just, I'm just curious, like going back to February, we said 52% of the problem was due to this membrane. Now, is that all looked after now, or where do we stand on that? And
so, Ms. McGoldrick, I see that you've turned on. Were you looking to respond? And then you can turn it over to whoever on your team you want to turn it over to.
Sure. So I think in response to Councillor Gazzola's first question around options, I would say that the necessary repairs are really required in order to address the membrane issue that you're just referring to now. And so in order to get an adhesion, a bond in terms of the membrane and make sure it's installed properly, and to make sure that we get the full life of that membrane, the necessary repairs are required now. But further, the comprehensive repairs, staff are strongly recommending council proceed with that, because when we need to go into repair in very short turnaround, given the condition, there is the potential to compromise the membrane that we're putting down now as we look to bring the two together. And so I would say at a minimum, the necessary repairs are required with a strong recommendation for the comprehensive. And then in terms of the budget question around the 9 million to the 14 million, the 14 million does include the increase that was in, I believe it was February, to 11.8 million to move to the 14 million. So the 14 million is the total cost of the construction.
But the 11.8 million in February was after taking out 1.7 million. So is that where's that 1.7 million now? Like part of it I know were for things, bike structures and all of these attachments, and those still have to be put back in somewhere. So that cost is there. Just going back to the membrane, in February, that membrane problem was going to cost us $1,070,000. So now this is on top of that.
So through the mayor, the additional costs are related to the structural elements that the membrane needs to be placed on to adhere. So they're really around the building envelope and the structural elements of the square in order to apply the membrane.
I'm really struggling to understand, and I'm not an engineer, obviously. I'm a bean counter. I've told you before, but if duct tape doesn't fix it, I'm sort of lost. But I'm really lost here as to where we're going, whether we have any options or not. One of the things I'd ask for is, are there some of the amenities that could be canceled or postponed? In the final analysis, it may not be where we want to go, but at least shouldn't we even just discuss them or consider them? Or is there such a thing? I mean, no matter how you look at it, this is a huge huge increase from where we were at, and I know the importance of the square as much as anybody else, but we can't do everything. We can't do everything.
Okay, do you have any more questions, Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I'm going to throw one final question out. Again, it's a whole question of priority, and when I'm not going to be supporting this. I went back to the minutes. Had a bit of trouble finding the minutes, but it's been before us twice, and twice I've not been able to support it, and I do know the importance of the square, and I do know that we have to do. It's got to be a main priority. I can see that, and so it really bothers me because that's something we have to do. There's got to be other things that we have to postpone, but we seem to want to do it. I'm going to ask everybody right now. We're not only get all these amounts to fix up, and I hope this is the last time, but I'm doubtful because the way this thing's gone up and down. I'm doubtful that this is the last time we'll be adjusting the budget. And I know people are really anxious to get it opened up as soon as possible, and I can understand that. Now, to do that, there's $150,000 involved. I want you to think as to whether the $150,000 we just approved for the soccer field in the wintertime, is it a higher priority than this $150,000 we need here? Just food for thought.
Okay.
That's all I have to say. I've had more than my share of time to discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few simple questions, and I think I'm asking them more for clarity, and I'll make a comment afterwards. I'll keep back in. Ms. Stewart, if the extra $900,000 for necessary repairs, if we don't do it, does it mean the money already spent will jeopardize that, and at the same time we will jeopardize the integrity of that space if you don't put the necessary repairs in place that the $900,000 is asking for?
Through the mayor, yes, that would be accurate assessment. As Ms. McGoldrick pointed out, the membrane has to bond to a suitable surface, and it has to be continuous and smooth. So some of the corroded flashing and areas like that would not be suitable.
And for the second part, I'm focusing on the two large items. And the second part, for comprehensive review, that's items that have come to light as we were doing the main work. And if you don't address that, that would mean, and clarify for me if my assertion is wrong, that once we complete the pre-planned work, we may end up having to rip some of that all over again to make the necessary repairs for as part of the comprehensive review. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes. Comprehensive scope of work was previously excluded from scope, and to tie in the membrane, if we do it in a second construction project on the square, we would have to take up some of what we complete this year to do that.
Is that a possibility or an absolute?
Through the mayor, that would be an absolute because of the way the membrane's applied, almost like a shingling effect. You have to have the correct overlap for it to be effective.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just key back in to make my comment.
You can just make your comment now, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just very quickly, just an answer to those two questions. What choice do we have? We can let our civic square, our citizen space crumble if you don't necessarily approve what's being asked of. And the other option is to not approve the comprehensive renewal and end up having spent the amount of monies we have in the millions and only to rip up a portion of it to do repairs that we will have to spend this money at a later point, jeopardizing additional cost. It's not a pleasant thing to have to come to a realization that a repair ends up costing more than anticipated, or some additional repairs come to light that we don't realize. But we can't, we can't step back from a responsibility. It's something we need to. It's not something that we want to. It's not a nice thing to do. It's a necessary thing to do, and I think we need to support it accordingly. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Singh, for saying and getting at some of the things I was going to get at. Just comments in that, this isn't anything staff could control. These new issues came up. They have to be fixed. They have to be done right. They have to be to code. We have to do it right. And it's unfortunate, but a tough decision and a tough time. But this Carl's Air Square is very important to us as a city. And we have to get the bones of this right, so what goes in the square works and is all great. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola, your comments? Even though you've made some already, but go ahead.
Just want to make a final comment. I don't want it to be said that I'm advocating for the Civic Square to crumble, and for us to not spend money that we're going to end up having to spend double down the road. I'm trying to just really, this is a substantial difference, and I wish we'd come up with some other ideas that this is a top priority. You're absolutely right. It's something we probably don't have a choice on. Yes, it's very important, but then there's got to be some things that maybe we can't do now, and we've got to postpone. We can't do everything. Okay, I won't support this tonight, and it's not that I don't agree that it needs to be done. I just cannot see this going forward with a unanimous vote saying everything's fine back here, so it isn't fine. We need to take notice of these things. So thank you for allowing me the extra little comment.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, obviously nobody wants to spend all this extra money. This is something that everybody here around this virtual horseshoe is taking note of, and we have to do it because we don't have any choices. This is a top priority, and down the road when we are looking at the budget, I'm sure that staff will be recommending various ways for us to be more frugal in 2021. And so this is something that we're going to have to grapple with, but unfortunately this City Hall outdoor spaces renovation needs to go forward, and we need to just deal with what we found when we pulled back the surface. That's just how it is.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. I'll just briefly be making a comment myself. I will be supporting this as I did at committee. I think this is essential and a responsible thing for us to do as stewards of this facility and all of the assets that we have as a community. Most members around this council, I think all members actually around this council and folks around the community can't relate to having a large public square and an ice rink that we're personally responsible for. But we can think about something like a roof on our house. And if we reflect this and compare it in that, if I can, so that people understand the analogy, you've got 2 layers on your roof and you need to replace it. It means you got to tear off the roof and the tar paper in order to put a new layer on. Well, lo and behold, after you tear all of that off, you find out there's a few holes in the plywood that happen because of water damage. Now you can simply say, okay, well, you know what, they're not that big. I can simply put a new roll of tar paper over top of it, put new shingles on it, and everything will be fine and we'll be okay for the next while, and I can just leave it at that. The reality is that isn't the wise thing to do, and isn't the wise way to repair your investment. And that's essentially what we're looking at when it comes to the square, obviously in a much bigger number, but those are the principles that we're getting at. And so we're having to make tough decisions, as you would if you were dealing with this in your own home, and as any resident would deal with in their own home. And as a result, we have to take the actions that we're taking to ensure that this square will continue to serve tens of thousands of people for several more decades going forward. A recorded vote has been called on this issue. I'll start, I guess I'll go back to Ward 1 this time. Start with Councillor Davey.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Schneider.
In favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Councillor Michaud.
Favor?
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
In favor.
Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis. Looks like we've lost Councillor Ioannidis. I'll come back to him at the end. Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
I think he was opposed.
I don't think so. We could try Councillor Gazzola. And the mayor is in favor, so the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on now to the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting, and Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Paul Singh that the items 1 through 3 of the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee be approved. And Mr. Mayor, I'll have an addition and some comments. Okay.
Okay, do you want to just reference the addition now?
Yes. So the addition is regarding item 2. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it is item 2. That that the Development Services Development Department, for inclusionary zoning be received. And in addition to that, just need to add that Christopher White, professional land economist and partner at Urban Metrics Inc., is qualified to provide the written opinion included as Appendix E to report DSD-20-150.
And this is a change coming from staff, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just a clerical need for us to name and approve a qualified expert in that area.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marsh. I've got 4 people in the queue. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to vote on item number 1 separately, and I had some questions and a potential amendment.
Okay. Well, why don't we deal with that right now? Go ahead.
Okay, great. So just quick question of staff. So we received some updated information via email about how we might expedite a district energy system. I just wanted to confirm with staff that we could expedite it, and the risk would be that if FCM didn't end up matching, that we would essentially be on the hook for, I believe, $110,000. Is that correct?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Okay, and I also want to confirm that the way the grant's administered, we can move ahead anyway, and then we'd sort of be rolling the dice on whether we would get that money. So we could still it's still possible for us to get it, but it's a risk that council will be taking.
Through the mayor, that's correct as well.
Okay, so in that case, I would actually move that we do go ahead and expedite it. I believe all members of this, I believe all members of council were interested in expediting this, and I think that we would be doing this business case whether we got money from FCM or not, just because the environment is so important to us and to the members of our community. So that would be the amendment to the motion.
Okay. So I'll deal with this one first then. Is there a seconder for your amendment, Councillor Davey? It's Councillor Singh is seconding it?
Yeah, Sorry, one more thing. I believe it said in the email as well that we'd have to identify a funding source, and I just had to ask staff whether they would want me to identify that now or if that can be through the budget process.
Who wants to take that? Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the mayor, what we'd recommend is we'd move ahead with an RFP process, and likely when that came back, we'd identify a funding source as a contingency. In the event that we weren't successful in getting FCM grant, I do think that the project's a good candidate, and so our chances are probably pretty good in terms of receiving funding, but we would identify it at that time.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chapman, Gazzola, or Singh, are you on this item? Okay, Councillor Chapman, on this item or on a different one?
Well, I have something on item 1 and number 2. And
Okay, so go ahead on number 1.
Yeah, I had asked staff to come back to us with alternatives to natural gas. And I just wanted to ask that you please elaborate further on this. And then I'll have comments later, but that's my question right now.
I'll have you make your comments as soon as you get an answer. Go ahead.
Mayor, I believe Mr. Donaghini is on the call and can answer that question.
Yes, Mr. Donaghini.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. To circle back with our consultant and have a bit more discussion about the opportunities for 100% renewable. So I summarized some of those to you in an email earlier this afternoon. But some of the key points to identify are, one, that sort of the initial back of the napkin estimate was that going 100% renewable would likely turn these projects from a net positive net negative return on investment from a financial perspective. Second of all, when we're dealing with a constrained urban environment like downtown, there are some additional challenges that come with trying to do renewables, be they waste energy from waste or biomass. Those have some issues with transportation or storage, getting biogas to certain sites. So the constrained environment makes gas or electricity from the provincial pretty good options. That's not to say that a future system, or if we expand to additional nodes, that we couldn't consider renewables in those areas. And I think that we probably should. And the other point to add is the beauty of a district energy system is that it's fuel independent. So we have the opportunities to transition to renewable fuels when those become more available. So for instance, say there's a biogas pipeline that comes through the neighborhood, it's easy for us to transition to a different fuel source where that wouldn't be possible on individual building levels. So those are some of the key considerations there. One area that we've been exploring that may have some merit is wastewater heat recovery. That doesn't have a big space, material handling, odor component. So that's relatively new technology, but there may be some opportunity there, and we're starting some exploratory conversations about that ability.
Okay, Councillor Chapman, you still have the floor.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd really like to see you pursue the wastewater heat recovery option. I mean, it's a puzzle to me why we would focus on return on investments. We're talking about greenhouse gas emissions and trying to come up with a very localized alternative to the burning of fossil fuels, and natural gas, as we know, is a fossil fuel. So it kind of, I don't want to say defeats the purpose of the whole project, but it certainly, I think there are ways that we could ensure, a full reduction of greenhouse gases if there's a willingness to do it. So I don't know what to say about the wastewater heat recovery thing, because we haven't really been given information on it. I don't know what the cost would be or what would be implied, but it sounds like maybe that is an alternative that we should be thinking about seriously.
Well, I think what staff indicated is that they will look at that as part of this next phase.
Right. So I highly encourage that.
Okay.
To me, it's not about investment or return on investments. It's about greenhouse gas emissions, and we've got a perfect opportunity to show that we get it, right? And so let's find a way to get rid of these fossil fuels in this tiny little area of the city. That's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those comments, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah.
Item number 1.
Pardon?
Item number 1? Yep.
Yes, yeah. I have a number of questions that I'd like to ask Mr. Donaghy. He's answered several of them for me over the last couple of days, but I just want to repeat some of them, okay? And by the way, the option I understand that we're looking at is option 2, and that's not the highest return on investment. It's the one that produces the highest reduction in greenhouse gases. Is that not right, Mr. Donaghy?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm struggling with some of the just a few of the minor things. I don't have any issues with this. I can be I'm totally supportive of it. I just want to clarify that this is really going to be a project of our Kitchener gas operation, and therefore it's sort of it's under our enterprise and has no direct impact at this time on the taxpayer. It really has an impact on our users of the gas system, but nothing on our taxpayers. Is that not right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're identifying utility as a potential leader. No decisions have been made on this, but fundamentally, a district energy system would probably be funded, or would likely be funded out of its own rates, not out of. We couldn't really mix those funding streams. The gas rates are regulated. This is not my area of expertise. Maybe Ms. McGoldrick could speak to it, but the gas rates are regulated on the Ontario Energy Board in a regulated area, and this would be more of an enterprise area.
Yeah, okay, but that's the same thing. They would be funded out of their revenue we make from their rates. It would not be funded from the taxpayer. I think that's an important thing to keep in the back of our minds. Okay, I just have a number of questions that I'm still not clear on. I'm trying to understand what the Waterloo Energy Group is. I'm trying to understand who do we answer to on this? Now this Waterloo Energy Group is made up of a group of 7 or 8, 10 people who are all knowledgeable people in this field, but who do they answer to? Do they answer to the region? Do they answer to the city? I think that's important to know going down the road.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, so a steering committee was established that includes senior representatives from each of the municipalities, including the region of Waterloo and the utilities, and they're guiding sort of the project work of that group. So there's one staff member that forms that business structure, and that's located in Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro. But that staff member reports to that steering committee, and then as individual projects are identified, they're referred to the respective council or board that's responsible. So in this case, this district energy system is being referred to City of Kitchener Council as a City of Kitchener project. It's been identified.
Okay, so going forward at this point, we're dealing with something that people that are involved with it are going to be answering to the City of Kitchener and to this council here. Okay, not to any other organization, not to the region. Right?
Through the mayor, that's correct. So we've identified that this district energy system located in the Innovation District is a best fit within the City of Kitchener, and we'll look at whether that's within KU or elsewhere as we explore this further.
Yeah. Okay, reading the report, this for Mr. Again, it sounds like that the base of where this structure will be erected is at the depot center of the region. Did I read that correctly?
Through the chair, so we are looking at the specific location as part of it. The likely location would be within the Brom yards or the Brom lands, and so we are looking at options around that. And we understand that there is potential for mixed use development around this as well. So we're looking at all those options as we explore it further.
Okay, so it's on city land then. It's on City of Kitchener, under City of Kitchener ownership.
Through the
Right.
that's the assumption right now as we work through the second phase of the study.
Okay. And I'll make this my last question. The study we've already had has a tremendous amount of detail in it. They've done a great an awful lot of research on it. So going forward, it talked about 9 different steps that need to be taken, and the first one is the business case. Now, how much more is that business case going to tell us that original consultant hasn't already told us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've identified a fair bit of work that needs to be done above and beyond this work. So this work is what we're calling pre-feasibility study. So the financials are plus or minus 50%. There's a fair bit of refinement that needs to happen there. They really need to understand how is it going to be marketed? How do we secure customers? What's the funding strategy? How are we going to charge this out? What are the growth prospects? What's the governance look like? There's a fair few questions that need to be. Fundamentally, we need to articulate what is the offering, the customer, the developer, when is it coming, how much is it going to cost, what does the contract look like? So those are the kinds of questions that have been is ones we need to answer before we can recommend to council that they make a business decision to start on detailed design.
And I can appreciate that, but if you look at on page 1,
Councilor Gazzola, you said that was the last question, and you're over time already.
Well,
so you can dial back in if you have more. Because I already
one more question.
I'll come back to you then. There's other people in the queue. Councilor Singh.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, for option 2, as in the report, it outlines a 5.3% return and it states over a 25-year internal rate of return. Is that an annual rate of return, or would that be over the 25 years? My assumption is that that's an annual return of 5.3, but over a 25-year period. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes.
Okay, all right. And the other thing is, you know what, that was the only clarity. I had some other questions, but I think I'll leave that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Chapman, was it on this item?
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could propose an amendment to the motion that we have before us.
Okay, sure.
So it's the way it reads right now. It says that staff be directed to develop a business plan for a downtown district energy system as outlined in Development Services Department report, And I'd like to add to that, including an overview of wastewater heat recovery. And I want that specified because we were, there's a whole list of alternative renewable ways that we could do this, but that seems to be one that is the favored one at this point. And I just like it to be specified in the direction that we're giving to staff, so that we actually get a report back on that and it's included. But I just want to say that I am fully in favor of district energy. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I just want to, try to make it as green as we can. So I'd like to just add that sentence, including an overview of wastewater heat recovery.
Okay, is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Johnson, thank you. Councillor Marsh, just to be clear, the first recommendation you brought forward was with the amended wording. That wasn't an amendment. That was simply the motion that you're making and bringing forward from committee with the added wording from staff, correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's the way I was taking it, and not as an amendment. Okay, so Councillor Chapman's motion has been moved, and amendment has been moved and seconded. Councillor Gazzola, you had one more question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, on page 152 to 154, 155, there's a list of 8 tasks which are the next things that need to be done. And from what I'm understanding, the first task is to develop a business concept. And that's what we're approving tonight. Now, that in order to do that, I'm seeing a bill of up to $200,000. Are we going to run into that kind of requirement for each of the 8 tasks that have been set out that need to be done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's more of a catch-all, really. In terms of the next phases after a business plan, we'd be moving right into detailed design. So that's where we start getting into, the 47 million kind of figures that we're talking about in implementation, and typical percentages of engineering fees on top of those capital.
So does this study look after all of those 8 tasks?
Through just can you give me that page number again, and I'll just make sure, I'll just double check.
152 to 154. Yeah, 152. Actually goes down to 155. I just want to make sure, are we going to answer all of those 8 tasks for this study that we're going into?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Yeah, we'll stop just on the task 1 to 6. Finalizing project definition is really the I think we'll cover all for detailed design.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Singh, I see you've got, is that a question or comment?
Well, I do have a comment, Mr. Mayor, but quickly a question just for clarity from Councillor Chapman's amendment.
Go ahead.
Well, it's not clarity from her, but more a question of staff. I think Tim has already kind of given some explanations to council from previous questions that the technology is not as clear with, I guess, energy capture from wastewater. Can you explain a little more in trying to build a business case on information that's not as widely prevalent, or a tested, I guess, a tested method, or a method that's not as widely tested yet? Can you just give more information if council were to support that amendment and the business case around that, how, the success rate of that, and have any other communities implemented some, such a energy capture from wastewater?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it is prevalent. It's very prevalent in Scandinavia. There's an existing system in the Vancouver neighborhood called False Creek. That's the one Canadian example that I'm aware of. I couldn't give you an estimate on success rate.
Okay. Why did staff not look at that additionally on their own? And where would the hurdle be if you were to have council direction in exploring, investigating it further?
through you, Mr. Mayor, it wasn't identified as a fuel source initially in the phase 1 pre-feasibility study. I think mostly because it was relatively untested in Canada. That's my understanding. That decision predates my involvement in the project. But that's my high-level understanding.
Mr. Reedman, and then I may jump in on this for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, through the mayor, the big component of the first phase is looking at sort of the proven technologies, and we know that we have a large aquifer here, and part of the analysis was really looking to see if a geothermal system on a larger scale would work well. I think there's a couple of things that we would have to look at as part of this next phase to look at the possibility of heat recovery. Part of the driver on that would be if there's enough trunk sewer heat that's available. And so, those are things that we can look at. It depends on that initial screening, how far down the path we can go on that, because, sometimes when you're building a whole community like the False Creek community, when you're building in a geothermal system or district heating system, you can actually place it on the trunk sewer if that's part of the goals and objectives. And so we can do that analysis as part of this next phase, but just like exploring the geothermal component and the groundwater conditions, conditions would have to be right to support that fully as we develop out the next part of the business case.
Yeah, I think the only thing I was going to add is, in addition to False Creek, I believe there was a small pilot of this done as part of Dockside Green in Victoria. So you may want to just check that. But Councillor Singh, staff are right. It's more of where it has happened. It's been more in Europe up till now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I will deal with the amendment that's been put on the floor. Those in favor of the amendment?
I wanted to make a comment on that. Do I have an opportunity? I've asked questions.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
I'd like to make I'm totally in favor of the direction we're moving here, but I'm not clear in my mind whether to support the amendment. We're really going down a path here. It's a brand new path. It's a bit of Star Wars. I can see the benefit of it. The big benefit, and I can totally support this, is the reduction in greenhouse gases. And it's amazing what from the information that's been presented to us already, what we're able to accomplish going down the road. I'm just trying to understand what is the benefit of rushing ahead with this. Why do we need to do that? Why not go to FCM, see if they're prepared to support us and give us the grant, and then move forward. If they turn us down, then we can stop and decide, do we want to keep going forward with it? But it's a substantial study, going to cost $250,000, well worth it. But what do we gain by going at it wholeheartedly tomorrow without waiting to hear what FCM would say about our grant request?
Well, that amendment.
That's a comment.
Okay, well, that amendment, which I'll come to next, was Councillor Davies, and he has his hand up, so I'll let him speak to it, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, I'll speak to it quickly. Councillor Gazzola, it's a good question, but I think my response is, whether FCM funds this or not, I personally 100% want to do this. So I want to go ahead with and what it also gains us is a little bit of time. But you know what? Sure, in the fullness of time, 6 months, a year isn't going to be tremendously significant. But if we're going to do it for sure anyway, why not do it and start reducing our greenhouse gases a little bit earlier?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davies. And I guess for me, as we know, there's a lot of development that's going on in that part of the city over the next little while, and If there is, I mean, ideally, if we can get an application in and get it processed, it makes sense. But I think if we can get actually some projects onto it sooner rather than later, whether it's the region's transit facility, the ultimate development of the innovation district that we have, or the other buildings that are going to be going up in the area. I think it's just trying to capitalize on that is why, quite frankly, I think your amendment makes sense. So I'll go back now to Councillor Chapman's amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That amendment is carried. I'll now deal with Councillor Davies' amendment, and I think there was a seconder for your amendment, correct, Councillor Davy? Or not?
I think it was Councillor Ioannidis.
Councillor Ioannidis, okay, thank you. Yeah, was it, or was it Councillor Singh? It was Councillor Singh. Okay, thank you. So duly noted. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried, and the motion, the main motion as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Donahaney. Great work, and we look forward to seeing that come forward. I think Councillor Marsh on item number 2. Your hand was up. Or no?
Yes. Yeah, I have comment on item number 3, but I think Councillor Chapman said something about comment on number 2.
Okay, I'll come back to you for number 3. Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, so my first question has to do with this additional recommendation that that was circulated today. What are we actually agreeing to here? Like, are we saying that, yeah, this Christopher White is a professional, we have 100% faith in what he's saying, and therefore everything that comes in the initial report we're adopting? Is that what we're doing here? Or
Mr. Reedman, can you provide the clarity?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So because this is new legislation, I know we're in consultation with other municipalities that are working through this as well. And there are specific conditions that need to be met. And so this is to really meet a condition of the provincial legislation, just to clearly state that a professional that does work in this realm has peer reviewed the document. So really it's to meet the legislative requirements in case there's a challenge down the road, but it's very much a procedural matter to align with the provincial legislation.
So we're not saying that tomorrow we could totally vote against this whole inclusionary zoning idea. Not that I'm suggesting that be the case, but we're not tied to anything by adding this clause.
Correct. We are just confirming that a professional that does work in this field has peer reviewed and has certified the information as deemed correct by the other consultant.
Okay, I just wanted clarification on that. Then I'd just like to, I'll have some comments later, but I have a question to staff, well, I guess to Mr. Donahaney. In your mind, what is inclusionary zoning? Why is it there in the first place?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are a lot of planning policies that enable and encourage the provision of affordable housing, but up until inclusionary zoning, there was none that were. We've seen a lot of us with it in American jurisdictions to bring housing online, especially for moderate income households. So to me, that's the promise of inclusionary zoning. It's an exciting new tool that integrates the requirement for affordable housing into business as usual planning in an exciting way.
So why is the report that we've been handed focused on the benefits that inclusionary zoning would or would not bring to the development community, and not to addressing the issue of affordable housing, the need for affordable housing?
Mr. Reedman, you were looking to jump in there?
Through the chair, so I don't necessarily believe that it talks about the benefit for the development community. We know that this adds an additional constraint on the development industry. What the report speaks to is that if a project isn't viable, from a profit perspective, the project won't go forward and there will be no housing built, whether it's market rate or otherwise. And so what the inclusionary zoning study has looked at is that elasticity in the land value to ensure that we can get additional units of more affordable housing in a development project. We know that there's other tools that are targeted for more deeply affordable units, like utilizing our land as assets towards more deeply affordable housing units. And so this is, again, just one tool in the toolbox that is meant to bring more affordable units onto the market, not necessarily deeply affordable, but helping relieve that pressure throughout the affordability spectrum.
Okay, I'll save my comments till later unless you want me to comment now. Isn't nobody else?
There's nobody else in the queue, so please go ahead.
Okay, so I think in principle, inclusion zoning is a great initiative, and I'm not going to block the passing of what's being proposed here because I think it's at such a preliminary stage, and I think it's something that we need to continue to explore and hopefully come up with something that's actually going to address the affordable housing crisis that we have in the region. My concern with the study, yes, maybe it's not totally focused on interest of developers, but throughout this study we have comments talking or parts of the report referring to the marketability, the project viability, the profit margins, demand and supply, market strengths and weaknesses. And that to me is pretty market driven. Doesn't speak to me about the affordable housing need that the community has. And I said this in committee, and I'll say it again here today. And this is paraphrasing what Mike Layton said. Mike Layton is a city councilor in Toronto, and they're going through the inclusionary zoning discussion as well. And he said that we can't let the market determine affordability. And to that, I'll add that we need to look at people's incomes and ability to pay. We need to see what that need is. And I think the Affordable Housing Strategy Committee has come up with an excellent report demonstrating the need. And, I remind staff as we go forward on this study and this whole project to remember that housing is a human right and not just a commodity. So, like I said, I will be supporting what we have in front of us, but mainly because it's at a very early stage. And I think as things progress, I hope that we can keep those thoughts in mind.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman. So number 2 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried unanimously. And then item number 3, I believe Councillor Marsh, you indicated you wanted to speak to it, and I know there were some emails flying around on this today.
Yes, I just want to make sure that council, who I know was copied on some of the emails, as well as the general members of the public are aware that for this zone change application at 290 Sheldon, the vast majority of the neighbors in that neighborhood are not in favor. They are not wanting it, and I want to speak to that, and I want to just speak to some of the complaints about the process as well. So I just want to make sure that our council is aware that residents around that area are concerned about high density. They're concerned about higher traffic in their area. This past summer, the condominium that's beside 290 Sheldon had to renovate their parking garage, and all of the cars had to park on the street. And it was very challenging for everybody because of driveways being blocked, because of corner visibility triangles being blocked. And even though bylaw was out there often, it was not enough to appease the need. So it's clear in the report that the neighbors are not opposed to affordable housing in general, but I think what they are opposed to is higher density, especially because there is a townhouse development proposed right across the street that is for, I think, 31 units, well, 30 something units, but that's not been started yet. But I just also want to speak to the fact that neighbors were not made aware in an adequate way, in their opinion. And I agree that the radius for notification in general is too short. We really do have to relook at that. And I'm really glad that we're reviewing our developmental services. Neighbors are feeling that their written and verbal submissions were not considered with the same weight as any delegate presentations. And that's how they're feeling. But the thing is that with our Zoom calls, we have to, as a council, be aware that not everybody's comfortable with using this technology, even though we do have, the phone-in option. And nevertheless, it's a new technology. We have a pandemic, so we have no choice. I'm not saying that we have to do something different. I'm just making sure that we're aware that this is a reality. In addition, the sign in front of the property, which is of course located at the end of a cul-de-sac, was essentially invisible from the sidewalk. So there were neighbors who didn't know about it until their other neighbors came around with a petition to collect signatures against a proposed multi-use trail, which was proposed to be adjacent to the property, but in the end, staff is not recommending it go forward at this time. All that to say, I know that, oh yeah, and in addition, unfortunately, our whole meeting for the committee was not recorded, which was a glitch that is rare, but it happened, and there's no way to re-record it. It's done. So that's a shame. So these residents are feeling upset and feeling like they are not being heard. And I just wanted to make sure everybody knows before they vote on this issue.
Thank you for sharing that, Councillor Marsh. And I think that is something that we should take into account. And I'll have some conversations with clerks in terms of how maybe we can deal with at least people who submit written deputations. Maybe there's a way for them to be, formally read into the minutes or something, but we'll explore that and report back to council on that. But with that, it is moved and seconded. So all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried unanimously. That is it for that committee. Just bear with me. Any unfinished business? Sorry, just trying to readjust my screen. No, any new business? Okay. So we'll now, oh, sorry, there is one other item, I believe, of new business, and that is Councillor Singh's automated speed enforcement program motion. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you want me to just read the therefore?
Yeah, the operative phrases, please.
Yeah, the operative phrases are, therefore be it resolved that the City of Kitchener advocate to the Ministry of Transportation and to the Ministry of the Attorney General to amend the necessary acts that would permit municipalities to use an administrative monetary penalty system AMPS, for the purpose of administering automated speed enforcement infractions, and that the City of Kitchener recommend to the Regional Waterloo Chair and Regional Council that the ASE program proceed with 4 automated speed enforcement sites within the City of Kitchener for phase 1 of ASE, as per the initial strategy discussed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore be it resolved that City of Kitchener recommend to the Regional Waterloo that the second phase of ASE proceed prior to the start of 2021 school year. And finally, that the number of locations selected in subsequent phases be determined by population or other scientific metrics and applied throughout the region rather than distributed equally amongst regional partners.
And is there a seconder for that, Councillor Singh? Councillor Johnson? Thank you. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Any questions and answers? I will note that the clerk did forward to us some input from a resident concerning some anti-racist graffiti that was found on the Spurline Trail this weekend. Staff were able to quickly identify that it was actually on the Waterloo portion, and this was all through social media, and Waterloo staff were able to remove it. But I think it does speak to the broader issue. I know several of us commented on the issue and how anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism has no place in our community, and it is something that the Waterloo Regional Police Service and our staff continue to monitor when issues like that do come up. Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, I just want to point out that we need to make sure that we respond quickly to hate speech and hate written statements like that, even if it's on the weekend. I know that the City of Waterloo did a quick job, but it wasn't clear until later in the weekend that it had been dealt with. So there was still people trying to bring attention to it when it had already been removed. So I just want us to make sure that here at the city, if and when we do find hate graffiti, that we make sure that we have a procedure that is in place for us to get rid of it ASAP. I think we do, but I'm just concerned that sometimes on the weekend it might be delayed, and so just like to make staff aware that that's something that we need. I'd like to propose that we make sure that we have a policy on that.
I don't know if Ms. McGoldrick wants to add anything, but I do know that we do act on those kinds of things quickly when the call center becomes informed of them, because there was a stretch, I believe, over on the other trail back earlier in the summer, and it was dealt with. Ms. McGoldrick, I see you're on.
So through the mayor, that's correct. We do have a procedure through our corporate contact center to immediately call out staff as it relates to offensive and hate-related graffiti. And further, our corporate contact center staff have the ability to access social media and update as these issues are resolved, and they do so. And so just wanted to share that information as well.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanuk. Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up with Denise as well. I had some issues in my ward, and it was dealt with incredibly lightning fast, actually. And I think staff have that policy in place. Like whenever that's called in, it's dealt with right away. And so I have no issue with the way the staff are handling it right now.
Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chapman, your mic's not on.
Yeah, no, I'm not questioning the speed at which things get addressed here in the city either. I think they are looked after quite quickly, but I'm just looking at the submission from David Argenti, and I just wonder if the city has a policy that says something like hate has no place in Kitchener. You know, do we have a statement of that sort? And if not, is it something that we could be considering?
Someone from staff want to respond? Mr. May?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the items in an 8-part work plan that staff have developed for this year and next year is the development of a comprehensive equity and inclusion policy for the city. And I fully suspect that those kind of statements will form the basis of that policy.
Okay, well, I look forward to see that because I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, certainly when these situations sadly do come up, I've been very clear in our messaging from a municipal perspective in response to those. Okay, moving on then to the bylaws. It's been moved by, sorry, Councillor Singh, do you have another question or is that your hand up from before?
Just a new business. I think this wasn't noted, even though the vote got taken on inclusionary zoning. Some of this information came a little late and I just saw the email now. The Affordable Housing Strategy Committee was pooled in seeing their support, you know, their interest in support in Councillor Ioannidis's motion. And I just want to update that 52% of the committee members that are non-staff did respond, and it was overwhelmingly in support. Of those that responded, 11 were in support and only 2 that did not. I thought I'd just bring that to the record, even though we took the vote already.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that information. So we're on to the first reading of the bylaws, and moved by Councillor Schneider and seconded by Councillor Michaud. The lead be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, and that the same be taken as read a first time and stand referred to committee of the whole. But just before we do that, I see the clerk is here because there is an additional bylaw. Ms. Tarling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have one late starter bylaw with respect to zoning bylaw for 290 Sheldon Avenue North relating to PSIC item number 3.
Thank you. So they have been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Move that it's been moved by Councillor Chapman that council resolve itself into committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Chapman, over to you.
Okay, so first we need a mover for second reading of the bylaws. Councillor Davey, and all those in favor? And opposed? Let me see if I get all this right. Okay, so then we need movers for each agenda item that appears on the administrative report section of the agenda. Is there any discussion on any of these before we vote? No? Okay, so we can deal with them as one solo piece. Is that okay?
So I'll move, sure, I'll move all 3.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? No discussion. And then additional items. So we have been handed an additional item about the execution of non-disclosure agreements. Is there any discussion?
So we need to waive notice on that first, I think, Councillor Chapman.
Okay. So what do I say?
Okay, so I'll move that we waive notice.
Okay, thank you. That doesn't say that in my cheat notes here. So all those in favor of waiving the motion? Okay, good. So discussion on this item. I see Councillor Gazzola has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, this has come to us at the 11th hour. Does it have to be dealt with tonight? Can it not come through the normal committee flow of things where it's dealt with a committee and then we approve it a week or so later?
Can staff?
And I'll make a comment while I'm at it. I want a recorded vote on it. I don't know what it's another one of these things slowly that we're bringing to transfer authority for these things to staff as opposed to council. I guess council is so busy that we can't deal with these little minor issues. So I'd like a recorded vote. I won't be supporting it one by one. We pretty soon won't need a council here, just a staff. Thank you.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes, thank you. Just can tell you that, in fact, we do need the approval tonight, if at all possible, as there's a few things in the works right now with staff and the organization dealing with extraneous companies outside of the organization, and they require an NDA. So unfortunately, it was my mistake. This report was supposed to come forward just around the time COVID hit, and it was an oversight on my part that this didn't follow through shortly after we started resuming virtual meetings.
Are there any other comments? I would like to make an amendment to the recommendation. And that is, so it reads currently that the CAO, deputy CAO, or department heads be authorized to execute non-disclosure agreements. And I would like to add, except those for matters involving land transfers. And then it finishes, said agreements to be to the satisfaction of the city solicitor. So I'd like to add that that clause. I understand that it could include land transfers if we keep it the way it is. And I think that any land transfers should always come back to city council. And there could be other things, but that was one thing that I have great concern about. And so I'd like that to be added. Any comments? Councillor Davey?
Yeah, thank you. I'd actually ask staff. It's not my understanding that anything to do with land disposition would be included in NDA, but I'd ask staff to clarify if they could.
Ms. McDonald, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I can clarify that for you. In fact, it could be depending on the situation, but typically it is not. So in my many years of working with the City of Kitchener, we have never used an NDA for a land transfer. I believe Councillor Chapman is just asking for it just for clarification, so it never is used. So if she had reached out to me and I indicated that is a rarity, but if you'd like to qualify it, you'd be entitled to do so. Okay,
no problem. And then just quick, I'm a stickler for rules sometimes. As Councillor Chapman's the chair, is she allowed to make an amendment? No? Okay, so Councillor Chapman, I'll move that in your behalf.
Thank you.
So,
yes, Mayor Baranovich?
Well, I guess my question is, because normally when when we would get an NDA is when a company approaches the city because they're looking at making investments here or looking at buying land or selling land that they may either own or be interested in, but don't necessarily want their company out there in until they make a decision. So I guess I'm struggling to understand. I mean, first of all, I'm surprised that we even need this, but because all it's doing is binding the individual, and secondly, that would sort of defeat things from an economic development point of view.
Ms. McDonald, did you want to speak to that?
If I understood the mayor correctly, these come up from time to time when we're dealing with often software agreements, for instance. If we're dealing with software vendor, they require an NDA in order to have full disclosure to the city as to what their product does. So it's things like that is when we use them. And so it's useful to be in a position to have them available, and it can be binding on the entire corporation if it's signed by someone bound by that's delegated the authority, such as what we're asking you to do today. And then the obligation is on the person signing that to inform staff that they can't disclose any information from that particular company. When Councillor Chapman reached out to me, her question today was really focused, I believe, on, I'm just checking my notes, involving real estate transactions involving developers. And I would strongly suggest to you, if you were going to pursue a qualifier to this resolution, you restrict it to real estate involving developers, not for just other real estate matters, because from time to time, we may want to canvass looking at a parcel of land, and the parties may want to ask us to sign an NDA. And I think that's acceptable. It doesn't mean that council's authorized the transaction. It just means that we can exchange information so that we can take the proper information to council for discussion.
But further to my question, I'm thinking of a scenario where this is where they would be common in my view, is company X is looking to invest in our community. They may be looking to buy a building. They may be looking to buy land. They want to come to the city for advice in our economic development area. That would be very common, or in our planning area. But they would ask for an NDA to be signed because they don't want, they don't want it out in the broad public that they're potentially looking and investing here. I know, for example, that Waterloo Region EDC regularly has to sign NDAs, as an example. So I just don't see how we can constrain our staff's hands in that regard.
Did you want to respond to that, Ms. McDonald? Or?
I think that's a preference for council, and I totally understand where the mayor is coming from, and would suggest that the broader you can make this, the better it is. I just provided information Councillor based on the scenario she had put towards me earlier today.
So and that's true. I mean, I changed the wording somewhat to say except those for matters involving developers to land transfers. But I'm happy if it makes more sense to talk about developers, then I was just thinking that land transfers left it more open. So that's why I changed the wording slightly.
I think for council's benefit, I think the clearest thing I can say to you is the broader the clause is, the more flexibility the organization has. It's really a preference of council. My advice would be to keep it as broad as possible. I think Councillor Chapman is asking to put a qualifier in, and you are entitled to do so if that's what you wish, but it would be better to keep it as broad as possible.
So keeping it as broad as possible, you're saying take it out altogether?
Taking out the qualifier is broader.
The qualifier of?
Except those matters involving developers, or however the wording is that you wish to put forward.
So you would take out that clause altogether is what you're saying?
Correct.
Councillor Chapman, you've got Mr. Chapman looking to comment, as well as Councillors Johnson and Ioannidis.
Okay, so I didn't catch the order of that.
Mr. Chapman's looking to respond, and then you've got Councillors Johnson and Ioannidis.
Okay, Mr. Chapman.
It may be helpful, Councillor Chapman, if you can clarify what scenario you're looking to avoid here through the amendment. Because my concern with it as worded is that there are many situations where the city may be looking to acquire land. The final approval will have to come to council in an open session, but we look to the vendor to supply information that they've procured and provided to the city in confidence. And so, for example, they may have commissioned plans or studies on their own, and the city can save money by relying on those plans or studies, and they may obligate us to sign an NDA and not disclose it more broadly. The ultimate purchase would still come to council in a public session for approval. And so I'm not clear on what issue you're trying to solve here, and it would be helpful if you can clarify that.
Yeah, so I guess my a scenario that came to mind when I came up with this amendment was, so a developer wants to have city property to build and partner with a not-for-profit, and where does, I mean, that's something that should not be decided through a non-disclosure agreement or through staff.
And so what I can say on that point is that staff would not have the authority to enter into an agreement to facilitate a partnership like that without coming to council, nor the ability to dispose of land without coming to council for approval. The only thing the NDA might provide for is that if proprietary information is provided by one of the partners, we would consent to basically maintain that information in confidence. But ultimately, the approval for any sort of partnership could not be achieved through an NDA. That would require a council direction.
Okay, well, thank you. Councillor Johnston?
Yes, thank you. And through you, I just wanted to comment that I agree with Mayor Verbanovic that I would be concerned that if we are too constrained by this, that we might lose out on opportunities to have businesses move here, as he mentioned, groups like our own economic development department or the Waterloo EDC are constantly looking for business development opportunities with other companies and organizations to be able to come to this community. And I would hate to see the ability to do that be constrained. I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Chapman, in terms of your concerns around that, or around what you had mentioned around development. But I think we need to be careful that we're not actually, tying our own hands by doing that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ioannidis?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're going down a pathway that I'm not comfortable with, and just adding words to something that has been, as staff mentioned, rather rare. And I don't want to impede the business of our economic development staff in looking at some of the circumstances as the mayor has indicated, and other issues that we've dealt with. I would just prefer that you would just drop your amendment.
Any other comments? Okay, I'm not going to drop my amendment. I'll leave it as accept those for matters involving developers, realizing that it's probably not going to pass. But
point of clarity, Councillor Chapman, you can't make the amendment. I believe Councillor Davey said he was prepared to make the amendment.
Okay.
Just to say, yeah, to save. Sorry, Councillor Chapman, you have the chair. Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, with respect to saving time and Councillor Chapman's amendment, I will still allow the amendment to be voted on and move it.
Thank you. Do I need a seconder?
Not here.
Okay. Councillor Johnston, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. All those in favor? Against? Councillor Gazzola? I didn't see your hand, but somebody probably did. Okay, thank you. So I guess that's all. The chair. Okay, can we have
no. You have to take a vote on the main motion.
Oh, okay, sorry. So can we vote on the recommendations?
I asked for a recorded vote on it too.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Recorded vote. Thank you. Make it difficult. Councillor, I'm going to go in order that I see people on the screen. So Councillor Singh? In favor. Councillor Marsh?
In favor.
Mayor Verbanovic?
In favor.
Councillor Davey?
In favor.
Councillor Johnston,
In favor.
Councillor Gazzola,
Opposed?
Councillor Ioannidis,
In favor.
Councillor Galloway, Seelock,
In favor.
Councillor Snyder,
In favor.
and Councillor Michaud. In favor? I didn't hear you, but I think I read your lips. Okay, and I will say that I'm in favor. So that passes. Thank you. Finally, I guess, is there a mover for the committee?
I'll
No,
move that
I've-
the committee, I'll move that the committee rise and report.
I'll say that.
So now you do all in favor?
Okay, all in favor, against, opposed? And then it goes back to you, Mayor.
And now you read your line.
Oh, I move that the proceedings and the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes are hereby adopted and confirmed.
Seconded by Councillor Johnson. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And it's been moved by Councillor Gazzola, seconded by Councillor Michaud, that the bylaws listed in the agenda for third reading be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and numbered serially by the clerk. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And just before we adjourn, I do want to take this opportunity to wish everyone in the community on behalf of council a very happy Thanksgiving this weekend. It's certainly going to be a different Thanksgiving as we continue to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 in our community. But it's also one where we have, I think, a lot to be grateful for, particularly for the many people in the healthcare sector, first responders and essential workers who have really worked incredibly diligently over the past 7 months, along with many others, to ensure that we can appropriately respond to the pandemic and keep our community running. I'll note that today is also World Teachers Day, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all of the educators who have been striving to look after our young people during these past several weeks and last spring as well, as part of the pandemic. You know, we do know that there is an upswing in the numbers, and as Dr. Wong has said, and will say again in her public announcements this week, families are urged to stay within their households, or certainly not go beyond their bubbles, which the province have said have been paused. It's important that we do everything we can to keep the numbers under control. We have seen a significant upswing, not like in some jurisdictions, and it's so important that everyone continue to wear a mask when out in public, to maintain physical distances of at least 2 meters or 6 feet, to wash hands diligently, and to follow the advice of public health officials if anyone finds themselves to be showing any symptoms of COVID-19. So with that, just happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Galloway Seelock. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Have a good one, everybody.